Welcome back to Autism at Home, brought to you by us at Early Autism Project Malaysia through our non-profit initiative, The Hope Project. My name is Joshabeth Isaacs and it's so nice to see you again. This is Unit 24 and it's all about functional communication. Now, if you are new to Autism at Home, we actually have a number of previous series that are surrounding this similar topic. Firstly, Unit 5, Teaching Speech and Language. This is essentially the key strategies we use with our young children to try to promote speech. This series includes a general introduction to teaching a child with autism to speak, using one language, to comment and not question, phrase completion, requesting, and two-way communication. Then we also have Unit 17 and Unit 21 on Building Language Part 1 and Part 2. And both these series are essentially specific components of building receptive and expressive language through receptive instructions, labels, familiar people, body parts, rooms, action labels, mean length of utterance, articulation, conversation questions, statement response, statement, question, guess, and describe. Wow, that was a mouthful. So many different components to building language. And so you may be wondering why the need for another series on communication. Well, there is quite the difference between speech, communication, and language. And let's review this previous clip from Unit 17. It is important that we also try to break down the slight difference between communication, language, and speech. Essentially, communication is the ability to communicate firstly one's needs, then eventually thoughts, feelings, or opinions. Communication can be verbal or non-verbal, such as gestures, facial expressions, sign language, writing, emails, text messages. Initially, babies use crying to communicate. And for children with autism, sometimes tantrums, aggression, or self-inflicting behaviors can be their way of communicating.
Then, language is the expansion of the vocabulary to communicate. For example, an expansion of language would include nouns, verbs, pronouns, adjectives, plurals, tenses, etc. It is important to know that language is both receptive and expressive, and the more vocabulary and content one has, the better able to communicate he or she will be able to. There is also a cognitive understanding of words use. More complex aspects of the language include the ability to answer questions, ask questions, clarify, negotiate, etc. There can be different national language, but the same cognitive understanding listed above is required. Sign language is also a type of expressive language, as it is using alternative modes of communication, such as PEX or the iPad.
And then speech itself, therefore, is the actual spoken words, the verbal articulation that can be used to communicate and express language. It requires oral motor movement to produce speech in correlation with auditory processing. And so this series is to emphasize and ensure that children on this spectrum are given the opportunity to functionally communicate their needs and their wants. So let's start with some key questions. How do you know if your child is hungry? Perhaps wants a favorite toy, maybe wants to go out, maybe needs the toilet, or maybe doesn't want something. Some common answers may include, my child will just go get what he wants on his own, or maybe they pull their parent's hand, perhaps cry, or present a more challenging behavior. Now, usually parents are somehow able to understand what their child wants. Or maybe you've learned how to understand just like all of us with our newborn babies. Because when they're hungry, they cry. When they're tired, they cry. When they need a nappy change, they cry. When they may have wind in their tummies, they may cry as well. And as a new mom or dad, you might try everything and then start to be able to figure it out. But then as children get older, these modes of communication become less appropriate for a number of reasons. Firstly, it can become more dangerous. For example, a child just gets what they want on their own. While this is good for independence, it can actually be dangerous when a child climbs on stacked chairs to get their favorite snack on the top shelf, or when a child just walks out the front door to head to their favorite playground or restaurant. It can also become socially inappropriate. Again, if a child tends to take what they want, they may, without realizing, just grab food from a neighboring table in the mall, or walk out with their favorite toy from a shop, not forgetting escalated, challenging behaviors, especially if this is in the community. All this can be very, very challenging to manage. And most of all, other people may not be able to understand these forms of communication, such as other caretakers or teachers, or even just people in the community. According to the PEX Manual, that's the Picture Exchange Communication System, there is a critical communications checklist, which outlines 9 specific areas of communication. These are requesting for reinforcements or desirables, basically things that the child wants, requesting for a break, requesting for help, rejecting, saying no, affirming or accepting, that's number 5, responding to wait, responding to visual or oral directions, transitioning between activities, and last but not least, following visual schedules. That's a critical communication checklist. We have some other lessons that actually may be more relevant to items 6 to 9, which is actually lesson 3 on waiting from unit 7 on building flexibility. There's also unit 10 on following instructions, and there's lesson 2 on teaching transitions from unit 7, as well as lesson 6 on following a schedule from unit 4 on teaching cooperation. And so while we always hope for verbal speech, in the event a child is not fluent in speaking or is nonverbal, we have to teach them a functional way to communicate, using modes of communication that are easy for them to learn and easy for others to understand. Often known as alternative and augmentative communication, AACs can be introduced as early as a child is able to pick up a visual card. AACs generally mean all methods of communication apart from speech. AACs include methods that have 0 to minimal technology and high technology as well. For instance, 0 to minimal tech AACs include writing, drawing, spelling through pointing to letters, using printed words or pictures, or even our gestures and facial expressions. The high-tech communication options include using communication apps on electronic devices such as the tablet, as well as speech-generating devices or softwares on computers. Whatever the mode of communication is, functional communication is so important, as if not, children could potentially use challenging behaviors to communicate. Think of a huge meltdown publicly to get what a child wants. Children could potentially get into dangerous situations because they just head off to get what they want. Think of children wandering off in public or leaving their home to head to the closest fast food restaurant or swimming pool. And most importantly, for children to have a more meaningful experience of life. When a child is able to communicate in a way that is successful, and we're able to communicate to a child in a way that they understand, they start to hopefully come out of their own world and understand better what is happening, and it helps with their overall orientation. Let's put it this way, put ourselves in their shoes. Imagine going to a foreign country and having no means of communication. You and I would certainly start to struggle. We may even start to have meltdowns from sheer frustration. So in this series, we hope to be able to explain a bit more on functional communication options from the perspective of signs and gestures, picture exchange communication system, communicating using devices, location-based visuals, communicating functionally to your child, and lastly, troubleshooting some common challenges. And so now it's your turn. Think about how your child currently typically communicates to you. Essentially, how do you know what your child wants or needs? Does your child use words, or pointing or gesturing? Or does your child pull your hand to get what they want? Or perhaps your child takes the items on their own? Or does your child cry or have other types of behaviors to communicate? Discuss if your child's current communication is functional and appropriate to their age, meaning other people are able to understand and there is a variety of options to communicate. Of the different functional communication options, discuss which one may be more suitable for your child. Signs and gestures, picture exchange communication system, which also known as PEX, communicating using devices, or location-based visuals. Well, there you go, a general introduction to functional communication. In the next lesson, we will be talking all about non-verbal communication, signs and gestures. Thank you very much for your support. And with the amount of interest we have received online, we've actually started providing online services and have worked with clients in other states of Malaysia, as well as other countries such as New Zealand, Philippines, Singapore, Switzerland, Indonesia, China, and Brunei. So do get in touch with us for more information by scanning this QR code. If you haven't already, do check out our online resource platform, Autism at Home, which has all the lesson videos, corresponding articles, and downloadables available for you for free. Stay updated through our social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And do click on the subscribe and follow buttons to get more information. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you very soon.